That here in DC this week, most of the news is about shutting things down. But roughly 2,100 miles from here, in the Mojave Desert, BrightSource is focused on starting things up. Take a look at Ivanpah. Just one example of the future of utility-scale solar. Pretty spectacular, isn't it? Just last week, we announced that Unit 1 successfully synchronized to the grid and is now delivering power, which is a major technical milestone for any thermal generation project. Between now and the end of this year, all 3 units will be will come online. And when fully operational, Ivanpah will be the world's largest concentrating solar thermal project, producing 377 megawatts of clean, reliable electricity, powering more than 140,000 homes annually. Now, when people think of solar, they tend to think of solar photovoltaics. At Ivanpah, we use a field of individually controlled mirrors called heliostats to track the sun, to focus that light on top of a tower to produce high pressure steam, solar steam, that powers a turbine to produce electricity, just like a conventional generation. Allow me to highlight just a few items from the project. Ivanpah is located on 3,500 acres of federal land, and on behalf of BrightSource and our equity owners, NRG and Google, as well as our EPC partner, Bechtel, I can report today that construction is now 98% complete. At peak of construction, we had nearly 3,000 people employed on site, including more than 2,100 craft workers. The project involved installing 173,500 heliostats, each one supporting 2 mirrors at an average rate of 1 per minute during construction. In fact, the use of dry cooling to condense steam significantly reduced water consumption to 100 acre-feet per year, a 95% reduction from traditional wet cooling methods, which is approximately the amount of water used by 300 homes in a year. Or for you golfers in the audience, the amount of water it takes to keep 2 holes green on the golf course that's actually located adjacent to the BrightSource project. The 3 towers of Ivanpah top off at 459 feet, or for those in the metric system, 140 meters, or for those who like history, 1 meter taller than the Great Pyramid. Our efforts to protect species and habitat have yielded invaluable scientific data that will ultimately allow us to return more desert tortoises to the Ivanpah Valley than if there had never been a project at all. And finally, Ivanpah will result in total employee earnings estimated at $650 million, much of which will flow back into the economy, and nearly $300 million paid in state and local taxes. It wasn't easy getting here. In fact, it's been a long and sometimes bumpy road with any of the challenges typically associated with large infrastructure projects, including permitting and financing that date back to 2007. Now, I ask you for a moment to imagine no Ivanpah. As my favorite Beatle, John Lennon, said, it's easy if you try, because without the support of the U.S. Department of Energy's loan guarantee program, Ivanpah would not have been constructed. DOE's loan guarantee was instrumental in attracting the capital necessary to finance this innovative project at commercial scale. It's no secret that the high-profile loan guarantee program has taken more than its fair share of flack from both sides of the aisle. Following Solyndra, and I think I can safely say that word now, wrong-headed policy was about the nicest thing people were willing to say about it publicly. But this characterization conveniently gets in the way of the facts. The loan guarantee program is doing precisely what it was designed to do, furnishing critical support in the deployment of first-of-its-kind utility-scale energy projects, not just for BrightSource, but for other large-scale renewable energy projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and promote a stronger and cleaner America. So here are the facts. Most of you are probably familiar. To date, of the program's $34.4 billion portfolio, estimated losses are only 2%. More than 90% of the loan loss reserve Congress set aside remains intact. We all know that when you take big swings, you'll miss sometimes by a mile. Yet by a wide margin, the loan guarantee program has been a model of success. In terms of tax policy, there are signs of encouragement. I refer specifically to the bipartisan Master Limited Partnerships Parity Act, sponsored by Delaware Senator Chris Coons and others, and now under consideration in Congress. Prospects are good for adoption of the MLP Parity Act if, and I say if, an appropriate legislative vehicle is available. Extending MLPs to renewables will generally lower project finance costs and with it the cost of renewable energy. So by allowing renewable energy producers to form MLPs, which combine the funding advantages of corporations and the tax advantages of partnerships, significant private capital can be unleashed into the energy market. However, support for MLP should not mean an immediate phase-out of the production tax credit or any weakening of the existing investment tax credit. These policies have been critical catalysts in the growth of the U.S. renewable energy industry. Since we last convened here a year ago today, Congress extended commenced construction language to Section 45 of the tax code, encompassing wind, biomass, and geothermal when utilizing the PTC or, at their election, the ITC. The commenced construction provision is a more flexible and predictable standard than placed in service. It allows for the full and efficient utilization of the tax credit rather than creating artificial and market-distorting deadlines that occur well in advance of the scheduled expiration. But this year, like last year, this provision does not extend to Section 48 technologies, which include solar, fuel cells, microturbines, combined heat and power, and distributed wind. Today, Section 48 technologies are being deployed across the United States, in many instances at military bases, universities, schools, and hospitals, oftentimes employing energy performance contracting methods that require no upfront capital costs to move the projects forward. These technologies are hard at work, and they're putting people to work in every state of the union. Yet from where we stand, prospects for the Section 48 technologies are more challenging than a year ago. Without the same financing rules offered to the other technologies, they are at a competitive disadvantage. Congress needs to act to ensure the health of these technologies and the jobs they're creating. We're already seeing projects hobbled by the lack of parity. Here's what developers are hearing from banks. If you can't guarantee your project will be in service at least 6 months before the investment tax credit expires, you shouldn't count on financing. Additionally, that same refrain is being heard from customers who rely on energy performance contracting, and one of the largest users of that is, in fact, the federal government. It doesn't seem right that you've invested your money, and if you're a day late, you lose 30% of the value of your project, even though your project will continue to produce benefits for many years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, this flies in the face of common sense. It's hard to argue against a level playing field, technology neutrality, and fairness, but that seems to be what's going on here. Clean energy projects often require multi-year development timelines, and I can tell you this is especially true of utility-scale solar. Issues related to financing, structuring, siting, and permitting can take years to resolve, and there's always the possibility of some unforeseen delay. Without rules in place that allow such projects access to financing on reasonable, predictable terms, they are being unfairly penalized. But beyond what's fair for me as a developer, regulatory certainty is imperative in enabling utilities to reach their renewable portfolio standards and attain diversity in their procurement. The net, without such rules, we, actually all of us, will in fact be retreating from a clean energy future rather than advancing towards it. This is not all of the above. This is all or nothing. Last year, 26 U.S. senators signed on to a Dear Colleague letter supporting equal treatment for commenced construction language for Section 48 technologies. It's simple. In order to realize an all of the above strategy, we need to account for and accommodate all of the above. After all, what's fair is fair. For as much as it's been in the headlines, it's important to remember that the renewable energy sector is still an emerging one, with wind turbines at one end of the commercialization spectrum and arguably wave and tidal power on the other today. Financing structures like MLPs are important, but they are not a substitute for tax incentives. The two remain equally important. Today, BrightSource is taking its solar field technology around the world to China, South Africa, Chile, and Morocco, just to name a few places. We have many foreign competitors, as should be expected. But I have to tell you that without exception, these competitors have governments that work hard to support their own emerging industries. America needs to do the same both here and abroad. But before I talk about our global perspective, let's look a little bit deeper into the brave new world that our nation's utilities are facing. It's safe to say that utilities are now entering an era of profound change. Consider this, of all the capacity added to the grid in the US last year, 75% was renewable energy. The increasing use of intermittent or variable resources such as wind and PV have created new challenges for the grid, which has brought the need for an improved analytical framework into greater focus. The grid of the future will be characterized by two-way information flow, two-way power flow, centralized and distributed generation, as well as increasing use of energy efficiency and demand response measures. At a minimum, the road ahead will require a new way of looking at things. But it's not just about what it costs to produce a kilowatt hour, it's about what it takes to keep the lights on. When selecting among competitive resource options, utilities must take into account least cost, best fit, technology and practices appropriate to their service territory, while at the same time accommodating individual customer investment decisions regarding energy. With increasingly more competitive choices available to consumers, there is a growing recognition among power buyers, grid operators, and regulators that new metrics are needed to help lead to more informed decision-making for the benefit of all consumers. Sound energy policy requires that utilities balance reliability, affordability, and environmental goals to ensure that their customers receive reliable power at competitive prices. We need only look to Superstorm Sandy, or the recent floodings in Colorado, which have given new resonance to the need for resiliency in our energy system. Regulatory constructs like net system costs, which considers both costs and benefits applied to all resources, can work more effectively towards these ends. The ramifications, though, of a reframed perspective are powerful indeed. Consider this recent calculation by Bloomberg New Energy Finance. The adoption of new net energy metering policies and legislation in just 8 states has increased the headroom to add an additional 7.2 gigawatts of distributed, meaning rooftop, solar PV onto the grid by 2020. So what is the new utility business model going to look like to meet the demands of 21st century America? To some degree, we've seen this movie before, and the ending is a happy one. Recall that with the breakup of AT&T in the 80s, innovation was unleashed in the private sector, at the time unimaginable. Today's ubiquitous smartphone, I think I heard one go off about 10 minutes ago. Today's ubiquitous smartphone is but one legacy of that realignment. Same for the music industry, for which the death knell was rung with the arrival of Napster, along with the lawsuits against consumers that followed. But at last count, Apple had sold 25 billion songs, that's billion with a B, on iTunes. With the movies, the same entertainment industry that gave us the DivX standard, which limited the number of times that you could watch a DVD that you purchased as a consumer, now embraces Netflix and Roku. They'll be the first to admit that even with hundreds of programming channels and thousands of content options available 24/7 on demand, I still on occasion find myself saying to my wife, I can't believe there's nothing to watch on television. In the late 90s, during the first wave of the dot-coms, it was the brick and mortar versus the internet companies, and a lot of talk about disintermediation, bypassing the middleman. But though the Pets.com sock puppet famously has gone the way of the dinosaur, today we have far more choices of how, where, and from whom we can buy our goods and services than ever before. Clearly, there are distinctions between regulated and unregulated markets, but my point is this. In the end, innovation in the face of disruptive market change has universally worked to the consumer's benefit. But for the benefits of transition to a new utility model to truly take hold, the value of reliability needs to be determined, tariffs appropriately designed, and the costs and benefits for both central and distributed resources appropriately priced and accounted for. Regulation willing, concentrating solar power is and will continue to play a significant role in this brave new world. You knew I'd get to this sooner or later. At BrightSource, we're concentrating our company's energy on those markets that would benefit from clean, renewable, high-value steam, solar steam. In electric power, petroleum, and industrial process markets, we're looking at opportunities to incorporate solar steam for applications such as enhanced oil recovery, desalinization, and solar augmentation of existing fossil-fired generation as a way of reducing carbon intensity. And there is significant value in flexibility. Combining thermal energy storage with concentrating solar power technology transforms the CSP plant into a dispatchable resource. Such flexibility deployed at utility scale enables the grid to accommodate increasing levels of variable resources while delivering clean energy reliably and cost-effectively. Absent appropriate regulation, policy, and financial support, our renewable industry, and indeed our nation, may fall short of their respective destinies. Contrast this with the rest of the world, where policies are evolving to support more investment in renewables rather than less. According to the just-released Global Trends in Renewable Energy Investment, policies to support renewable energy have become more flexible and responsive as costs have fallen faster than expected. Governments have adjusted to these market realities by revisiting previous policies, such as the price of feed-in tariffs. Germany and the UK have imposed degression mechanisms so that incentives can be lowered frequently to take into account cost reductions. Several European countries are moving toward market-based mechanisms that expose developers to at least some level of market risk. And for emerging economies such as India, Brazil, and South Africa, they've made extensive use of competitive reverse auctions in an attempt to attract renewable power investment at the lowest possible cost. China has pursued a mixture of policies, starting off with auctions for wind capacity, then a feed-in tariff. It also offers government support via land grants, low-cost credit, and central and provincial targets for renewables development. But the most damaging development for investor confidence have been retroactive cuts in support for existing wind and solar plants imposed in countries such as Spain, Czech Republic, and Bulgaria. So some here suggest at home that we leave the emerging renewable technologies to the vagaries of the market. The rest of the world gets it. Some countries because they want to, others because they have to. Consider that recently Chile adopted an RPS program of achieving 20% renewables by 2020, and Saudi Arabia has committed to generating 54 gigawatts of renewable power by 2035, including 35 gigawatts of concentrating solar power. Here in the US, the importance of state-set renewable portfolio standards is declining, as many jurisdictions have met or will soon exceed their goals. Instead, the trends are for greater use of environmental regulation, emission initiatives, or state emission initiatives such as the California carbon market. It's been said that the first step in the road to recovery is acknowledging you have a problem. This summer, I had the opportunity to visit Shanghai, China, during the week of the hottest temperatures on record. Without belaboring the obvious air quality problems that they suffer and that we've all heard about, every official I met with, I heard speak, both privately and publicly, was quick to say, we have an environmental problem, and we cannot continue as we have been. Through our participation in the US-China framework for renewable energy managed by the Department of Energy, BrightSource recently announced that our technology will soon be at work in China as part of the country's first commercial-scale CSP pilot project. And by commercial scale in China, that's the size of one of the towers at Ivanpah. Problem solving on this scale is also informing our considerable progress in South Africa and Morocco, where we are looking at opportunities to augment the existing coal fleet with solar steam to reduce both carbon intensity and improve existing fleet performance. It's important to note that American taxpayers materially benefit from renewable energy technology even when it's exported. Overall, 95% of the world's consumers live outside the US, and for every $1 billion of goods and services that America exports, we create more than 5,000 jobs here at home. So as we look to the future, it occurs to me that we find ourselves at somewhat of an inflection point. Today, total global renewable capacity exceeded 1,470 gigawatts in 2012, up 8.5% from 2011. Renewables made just over half of total net addition to electric capacity from all sources in 2012. And by year end, they had comprised more than 26% of global generating capacity and supplied an estimated 21.7% of global electricity. And that source is the REN 21 report. The International Energy Agency projects renewable energy will surpass natural gas, to become the world's second largest source of power generation by 2016. That's an EIA figure. And before 2010, U.S. electric vehicle demand was almost nothing. But in 2012, Americans bought more than 50,000 plug-in electric vehicles. In the first half of 2013, Americans doubled the number of electric vehicles they purchased compared to the same period in 2012. The benefits of low-cost gas, increased domestic oil production, and reliable renewables promise to turn our nation into an export power while reshaping our economy for the better. But to get to this future, we also need to get fairness in the form of a level playing field that allows renewables to realize their full potential. While we wait, BrightSource continues to advance the science and utility of solar steam on several fronts. So allow me to elaborate briefly. In enhanced oil recovery, Chevron's facility in Coalinga, California has proven itself now for more than a year with solar steam supplementing natural gas. Globally, there are regions in the world that have no access to natural gas infrastructure or LNG imports easily, and solar steam powered EOR represents a viable option. Much has been written and discussed about the water energy nexus. Saving energy saves water, and saving water saves energy. Using solar steam for desalinization serves both objectives. And while desalinization is not a hot topic here in the US, it is increasingly a challenge inextricably linked to a global economy based on energy. While we're also investigating CSP, small-scale CSP, for remote industrial applications such as mining and food processing, because it too seems to be a fruitful area for exploration. As I conclude my remarks this morning, I find myself returning to Ivanpah. In my estimation, all roads lead back to Ivanpah, or at least they should, because Ivanpah is a textbook example of how tax policy, clean energy policy, land use policy, environmental stewardship, and economic statecraft can work together to deliver on technology's promise. That technology is now proven, and the appetite for it exists worldwide. To continue our progress here and elsewhere, I think we need only to remember Robert Fulghum's advice in All I Really Need to Know, I Learned in Kindergarten about the energy industry. Clean up after yourself, be aware of wonder, and above all, play fair. It's how our industry should work, and when it does, it will inevitably move our nation and our world in a direction we all want, toward a clean, reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy future. So let's go get it. Thank you for your time this morning.